Hey there, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Lewis Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocates Debate Club. I had thought that it would be fun to do a rebuttal to the State of the Union address. However, there wasn't much content to rebut. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about the Utopia debate currently ongoing on my channel. It looks like Rational Wrongthink has his second video up, so I'll be linking to that and doing my own video in response to his soon. I have not had a chance to take a look at it today as I've been preparing this video, but if his last video was anything to go off of, I'm sure it'll be absolutely amazing. Now, as for the State of the Union address, Trump said amazingly little in a little over an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to go through it kind of blow by blow, because for anyone who's been paying attention politically and who, well, knows what's going on in America at least, there was really very little that was new. So for the first 25 or so minutes of the address, he goes into past and the current state of things. It basically just talks about things which any informed American probably already knows. He threw in a few veiled jabs at the opposing party, and of course, as was expected, talked about unity, but talked about unity specifically in comparison to things like resistance. He wasn't exactly subtle about it, but then, when is he? Minutes 25 to 29 were again old and used rhetoric, this time about the wall. Nothing new here. He says he'll get it built and that everyone's voted for it before, and blah, 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 blah. We've all heard of this. Nothing wrong with that if it's what you're into, but certainly nothing new. Minutes 39 to 42, just more things about the past and current state of affairs, specifically the fact that there are a lot of women in Congress, which they certainly felt the need to applaud, despite the fact that they applauded very little else throughout the address. Hey, you do what you can. So, minutes 42 to 45, he goes on about what he considers to be bad trade agreements and how he's been addressing them. Again, stuff about the current state of affairs, not really much looking forward. 45 to 46, he briefly touches on the reciprocal trade agreement, which is something that I believe he's proposing as of the State of the Union address, and which is something new. I'll touch on it at the end of the video because he only has 3 things. Minutes 46 to 57, he goes into healthcare, making vague promises for the future of pharmaceutical regulation, and again, just talks about stuff that if you're an informed American, you probably already know. One new thing out of that, well, not exactly new, but something looking forward at least, he does say he's asking Congress to ban third trimester, or not, he doesn't say third trimester, late-term abortions. And I'll talk about why that's ridiculous in just a minute. Minutes 57 to 60, an hour into this thing, and he's made 2 points. He talks about defense spending, NATO, treaty changes. I mean, a lot of it's interesting if you say, haven't been paying political attention for the past few years, if what you're really looking for is an introduction to current American politics from a position that is obviously very pro-current administration, then the speech could have been worse. It had a very high approval rating among those polled who watched it. However, if you're looking for anything new, it just wasn't there. So yeah, 57 to 60, he goes on about defense spending and military budgets, treaty changes, things we already know. So at an hour in, things get interesting for a little bit as he claims that we would be in war with North Korea if he hadn't been elected, and announced the final of his 3 new points moving forward, that he'll be meeting with the leader of North Korea again. And so, I'll get to that in a moment. An hour to an hour and 3 minutes in are basically just shots being fired at Maduro, Venezuela, and socialism. He does say that America will never be and is not a socialist country, which, I mean, sure, we're a democracy, we're a, social, capitalist, democratic republic, but we're not a socialist country. Never is a really dangerous word, though. Whatever your beliefs are of socialism, saying we'll never be a socialist country, well, it certainly plays well with his constituents, but it was kind of an odd way to end the hour. Claiming that we'd be in war with North Korea and then firing shots at socialism. Anyway, from an hour and 3 minutes into an hour and 12 minutes, he goes through more past and current issues in the Middle East from a very pro-military position. Talks about what's going on in Afghanistan quite a bit. Again, a fair bit of interesting things there if you haven't been paying attention, but if you've been politically active to any degree in the United States, nothing surprising or new. At a minute 12, he starts telling the story of a Holocaust survivor, one of 2 which he tells, and it is rather touching when the audience decides to sing the man happy birthday. I had a rather crude joke in my notes here that says happy birthday to Jew, but it really was a touching moment, as was the story of the second Holocaust survivor who actually got to meet a soldier who had been there when the concentration camp he'd stayed in was released. And so nothing new, no policy positions for Trump, but certainly a touching thing to bring to the speech from minutes, an hour and 12 to an hour and 17. Still, though, in a speech that's over an hour and 20 minutes long, you would have thought he would have got more than 3 points across, because in the final minutes from an hour and 17 to an hour and 22, when his speech ends, he credits progress to the past, all the way back to the soldiers in World War II, and gives his finishing statement. More unity, just the general political rhetoric. In conclusion, Trump told us 3 things that look forward and not at the current or past political situation in his entire hour and 22-minute speech. Number one, the reciprocal trade agreement. Now, this one is quite interesting. He says that it would allow us... Give me just one moment. There we go. Thank you. He tells us that it would allow us to give... when another country places tariffs or taxes on us on a specific good, we would be able to place the same taxes back on them equally without it having to, go through Congress and be a whole rigmarole, which is an idea he's talked about a lot before, so it's not really something new, but it is something he says he'll be focusing on in the upcoming year. The second, he'd like Congress to ban late-term abortions. If he really wanted that to happen, he should have done so when he had the Republican Congress. Asking Congress to do so now that there is a Democratic majority or in the House at least, is just kind of silly. I mean, it's not going to happen. I know that what he might be doing is using it as a starting point to bargain for a act that protects after-birth abortions, after the recent stories on that subject. But it was just kind of a silly thing for him to ask for when anyone who's paying attention knows that it's just not going to happen in the current political climate. Number 3, he's meeting the leader of North Korea. I wouldn't bring this up on a series of points as if it were important. It is just one world leader meeting another. It happens all the time, and these two in particular talk to each other frequently, so, or have in the past. So meeting each other is just not a big deal. They tweeted each other, but given that he only made 3 points, which I feel I must stress because he said an insane amount of nothing during his speech, I feel I have to bring it up again. And I personally would say that things in North and South Korea are currently going better, and that Trump can be a double-edged sword in this situation. He might have some credit, as the leader of South Korea gives, for bringing about the current peace talks. However, he could just as easy muddle them if he decides to say the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong little fat brown man. So, in conclusion, there was really very little to rebut in the State of the Union address. He was very pro-unity and pro-American, keeping his jabs at the other side particularly veiled. He got the female Democrats in Congress to stand and applaud him on at least one occasion when he was speaking about how many of them there were in Congress. And so overall, it certainly could have been worse. I mean, the approval rating in the polls shows that. But when I watched it, it just sounded like drivel. There was just no substance to it. And it really bothers me. I know I'm ranting a little bit about this now, but I had really planned to do a good rebuttal for you guys, and there simply wasn't much there. So I hope you've enjoyed a point-by-point. If you didn't watch the address, now you don't have to, as long as you're politically aware, because there really wasn't much new said. Once again, I'm Lewis Cipher, and thank you for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club.